I'm Kelly, 27 years old, working 2 jobs while studying nursing. Family used to mean everything to me until that text from my mum shattered my world. All because I refused to empty my tuition savings to cover my brother's gambling debts. Again. The worst part, I still sometimes wonder if standing my ground was worth losing my entire family. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you believe in standing up for yourself even when it breaks your heart. Growing up in suburban Michigan, our family seemed picture perfect from the outside. My parents Diana and Jack lived by an unspoken family code, loyalty above everything. Nothing mattered more than sticking together, especially during tough times. This meant covering for each other, helping each other, and never airing dirty laundry. My father worked at one of the big auto companies, and my mother managed a small clothing boutique. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had family vacations to Florida every other year, celebrated birthdays with enthusiasm, and always had a beautifully decorated Christmas tree. My younger brother Thomas and I shared a decent childhood with all the typical sibling rivalries, but there was always something different about how my parents treated Thomas. He was the golden child who could do no wrong. If Thomas got a C in math, my parents would blame the teacher. If I got an A- instead of an A, I'd be asked why I hadn't tried harder. Thomas played football and my parents never missed a game. I was on the debate team and they made it to maybe 2 competitions my entire high school career. Thomas is just more sensitive, my mother would say. He needs more encouragement. This pattern continued as we grew older. I worked hard through high school, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working part-time at the local pharmacy. I was determined to get scholarships for college because I knew how expensive nursing school would be. Meanwhile, Thomas barely graduated high school and spent most of his time playing video games and hanging out with friends my parents didn't approve of. When I got accepted to the University of Michigan's nursing program with a partial scholarship, my parents seemed proud but not surprised. "We always knew you'd figure it out," my dad said, as if my achievement was just me handling my own business, not something to celebrate. The real trouble started when my father lost his job during layoffs at the auto company. He was 54, too young to retire, but struggling to find comparable work in the industry. My mother's boutique wasn't doing well either. As online shopping began to dominate retail, money became tight and my parents' mood swings became more pronounced. My mother especially became increasingly controlling about family finances. She would call me regularly to detail their struggles, subtly suggesting that maybe I could help out more. Meanwhile, Thomas had dropped out of community college after just 1 semester, claiming it wasn't his thing. Instead of pushing him to find a job, my parents let him continue living at home, rent-free. It was during this time that Thomas started gambling. At first it seemed harmless. He'd go to the casino with friends and lose $50 here, win $70 there. But as time went on, the amounts grew larger. I remember coming home for Thanksgiving my sophomore year and overhearing my parents arguing about a $2,000 credit card bill Thomas had racked up at an online poker site. Instead of addressing the growing problem, they paid it off and swore Thomas to secrecy. "Your sister works so hard," I heard my mother tell him. "She doesn't need to know about this. It would just upset her." But I did know. And what upset me wasn't that Thomas had a problem. What upset me was that my parents enabled it while simultaneously making me feel guilty for pursuing my education instead of coming home to help. By my junior year, I had moved into an off-campus apartment with my roommate Amanda. I was working 2 jobs, one as a campus library assistant and another as a weekend aide at the university hospital. Between work classes and clinical rotations, I barely had time to sleep, let alone visit home. My parents interpreted this as me abandoning the family during difficult times. "Family should come first," my mother would say during our increasingly tense phone calls. "I don't understand why you need your own apartment when you could live at home and save money." What she didn't understand was that I needed space to grow. I needed to establish my independence. And deep down, I knew that if I moved back home, I'd get sucked into the toxic dynamic that was developing around Thomas's escalating problems. The holidays became battlegrounds. Every visit home included some argument about money, about my absence, about how Thomas was struggling while I was selfishly pursuing my own goals. The unspoken expectation was growing clearer. I was the responsible one, so I should be the one to help fix the family's problems. I tried to maintain a balance, sending home what money I could spare, calling regularly and visiting on important occasions. But with each interaction, I felt my resentment growing. I was working myself to exhaustion while Thomas faced no consequences for his actions. My parents' financial situation worsened partly due to their own choices, yet I was made to feel like the villain for not doing more. The summer before my senior year, I made the difficult decision to stay on campus and take extra shifts at the hospital rather than go home. This decision was met with cold fury from my mother and disappointment from my father. Thomas predictably didn't seem to care either way. Little did I know that this was just the beginning. The real test of family loyalty was yet to come, and it would force me to choose between my future and my family in ways I never thought possible. It was a Tuesday evening in early October when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I was studying for a pharmacology exam, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups in my small apartment. I almost didn't answer, knowing that calls from home rarely brought good news these days, but some lingering sense of duty made me pick up. "Kelly, you need to come home right now." My mother's voice was tight with panic. "It's a family emergency." My heart dropped. "Is someone hurt? Is Dad okay?" "Everyone's fine physically, but you need to come home, today. It's serious." She wouldn't elaborate further, which only heightened my anxiety. I looked at my study materials, thought about my exam the next day, and made a quick decision. I told my professor I had a family emergency and asked if I could take the exam later in the week. Then I threw some clothes in a bag and drove the 40 minutes to my parents' house, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. My mother met me at the door, her face drawn and pale. "They're in the living room," she said simply. I walked in to find my father sitting on the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands. Thomas was pacing back and forth, occasionally stopping to bite his fingernails, a nervous habit from childhood. No one spoke when I entered. "What's going on?" I asked, setting my bag down. "You're scaring me." My father looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Your brother's in trouble, Kelly. Big trouble." Thomas stopped pacing and turned to face me. For the first time, I noticed the bruise on his left cheek and the cut above his eyebrow. "I owe some people money," he said flatly. "Gambling debt. They're not the kind of people who take IOUs." "How much?" I asked, though. Something in me already knew the answer would be devastating. $15,000, my mother whispered from behind me, "and they want it by the end of the week." The room seemed to tilt slightly. $15,000, an impossible sum for a family already struggling financially, an impossible sum for anyone to come up with in a few days. "We've scraped together about $7,000, my father explained. "Your mother's selling her jewelry. I'm looking into a second mortgage, but that takes time we don't have." I nodded slowly, still processing. "So you need help. I understand that, but I don't have that kind of money. I'm a student." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother cleared her throat. "Your tuition savings," she said quietly. "We know you have money set aside for next semester." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Yes, I had money saved, $8,000 to be exact. Every penny I'd earned from my hospital job over the past year, carefully tucked away to cover what my scholarship didn't. Without it, I wouldn't be able to register for classes in January. "You want me to give up my tuition money?" My voice sounded strange, distant. "Not give up," Thomas interjected quickly. "Loan, it's just a loan. I'll pay you back as soon as I can." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "Like you paid back the $2,000 I loaned you last year, or the $1,000 before that." Thomas had the decency to look away, but my mother stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "This isn't about past mistakes. This is about your brother's safety." "These aren't nice people, Kelly. They've already hurt him once as a warning." I looked at Thomas's bruised face again and felt a wave of conflicting emotions, concern for his safety, frustration at his irresponsibility, and a growing sense of anger at being put in this position. "I'm sorry this happened," I said carefully. "I really am, but that money is for my education. If I give it to you, I can't register for next semester. I'd have to take a leave of absence, maybe lose my scholarship." "It's just one semester," my father argued. "You can work and save up again. Just one semester. As if delaying my education was a small thing. As if the competitive nursing program would simply hold my spot while I took time off to rebuild my savings." As we talked in circles, I remembered all the previous times I'd helped Thomas out of jams. The money I'd loaned him that was never repaid. The times I'd covered for him with our parents. The way my achievements were minimized while his smallest efforts were celebrated. Do you remember my high school graduation? I asked, suddenly interrupting my mother's increasingly emotional pleas. They all looked confused by the change of subject. You gave Thomas my graduation money to pay off a debt then too. $500 from Grandma that was supposed to be for my textbooks. That was different, my mother said dismissively. That was just textbooks. This is life or death. It's always life or death with Thomas, I said quietly. And somehow it's always my responsibility to fix it. Thomas flushed red. That's not fair. I didn't ask to have a gambling problem. But you've done nothing to address it either, I pointed out. No Gamblers Anonymous, no therapy, no taking responsibility. And now you want me to put my entire future on hold because you couldn't control yourself. The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother cried. My father alternated between angry outbursts and desperate pleas. Thomas mostly sulked and occasionally reminded everyone that he was the victim of addiction, not a bad person. Through it all, I felt a strange calm settling over me. For years, I had bent to family pressure, always putting others' needs before my own. But in that moment, watching the familiar pattern play out, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I can give you $1,000, I said finally. That's all I can spare without jeopardizing my education. The rest you'll have to figure out another way. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. 1,000. That's nothing. That won't help at all, Thomas spat. It's all I can give, I repeated more firmly this time. You selfish bitch, Thomas muttered, turning away. My father didn't correct him. My mother didn't defend me. In that moment, I understood that in their eyes, I was the villain of this story. The selfish daughter who wouldn't sacrifice for family. I should get back, I said, reaching for my bag. I have an exam tomorrow. If you walk out that door, my mother said, her voice cold, you're choosing yourself over this family. Remember that. I paused at the doorway, a lifetime of conditioning making me hesitate. I'm choosing my future, I corrected her. And if you loved me, you wouldn't ask me to give that up. I drove back to campus in a daze, tears streaming down my face. But despite the guilt and pain, there was also a small growing sense of liberation. For the first time in my life, I had set a boundary with my family and held it. I just had no idea how high the cost would be. The next 3 days passed in a blur of tension. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Each message was more desperate, more manipulative than the last. My father's tactics veered toward guilt. I never thought my own daughter would abandon us in our time of need. My mother's were more aggressive. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us. I managed to take my pharmacology exam, though I could barely focus. My professor, noting my distraction, asked if I needed more time. I shook my head and pushed through, earning a B- instead of my usual A. Somehow that grade seemed like a physical representation of how my family crisis was already affecting my future. On Thursday evening, just as I was returning from my hospital shift, there was a knock at my apartment door. I opened it to find my Aunt Stephanie, my mother's sister, standing in the hallway with a grim expression. Your mother sent me, she said without preamble. We need to talk. I let her in, too exhausted to argue. Aunt Stephanie had always been the family peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts at holiday gatherings and remembered everyone's birthdays. Your parents are beside themselves, she began, settling onto my second-hand couch. They don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. I took a deep breath. Did they tell you they want me to give up my tuition money to pay off Thomas's gambling debts? She nodded. I know it seems unfair, but family has to stick together in times like these. Thomas is in real danger. And what about me? What about my future? I asked. If I give them that money, I can't register for classes next semester. I might lose my scholarship. Why is Thomas's emergency more important than my education? Aunt Stephanie's expression hardened slightly. Your mother says you've always been stubborn, always had to do things your way. I laughed bitterly. My way, I've been working 2 jobs since I was 16. I earned my scholarship. I'm paying my own rent. How is that stubborn? It's not about the money, she insisted. It's about loyalty. It's about being there when your family needs you. And when will my family be there when I need them? I countered. The conversation went in circles with Aunt Stephanie repeatedly emphasizing family duty while dismissing my concerns about my education. Eventually, she delivered her real message. Your parents are calling a family meeting on Saturday. Everyone will be there, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your cousins. We're going to figure this out as a family, and you need to be there. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. Fine, I said, too tired to argue further. I'll be there. After she left, I called Amanda, who was staying at her boyfriend's place for the week. I needed to talk to someone outside the situation, someone who might understand. They're staging an intervention, she said bluntly after I explained. But not for your brother with the gambling problem. For you because you won't enable him. That's messed up, Kelly. What should I do? I asked, my voice small. Stand your ground, she said firmly. You've worked too hard to throw away your education. If they really love you, they'll find another way. Saturday arrived and I drove to my parents' house with a knot in my stomach. The driveway was full of family cars, confirming that this was indeed the full family gathering Aunt Stephanie had promised. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and walked inside. The living room had been arranged like a tribunal. Chairs in a semicircle with one chair positioned opposite, clearly meant for me. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, and adult cousins filled the other seats. My mother stood by the fireplace, red-eyed but resolute. My father sat with his arm around Thomas, who looked both frightened and smug. Kelly, my grandmother said warmly, rising to hug me. We're so glad you came. I hugged her back stiffly, then took my seat in the hot seat. What followed was 2 hours of the most intense emotional manipulation I'd ever experienced. One by one, family members spoke about the importance of family loyalty, about how blood was thicker than water, about how we all had to make sacrifices sometimes. My grandfather talked about how he'd given my father money to start his first business. My aunt recalled how my mother had taken care of her children during her divorce. Family is all we have in this world, my Uncle Jim intoned solemnly. When everything else falls away, family remains. No one mentioned that Thomas's emergency was entirely self-created. No one acknowledged that he'd made no effort to address his gambling addiction. No one seemed concerned about the impact on my education and future. When my turn came to speak, I tried to explain my position calmly. I love this family, I began, and I want to help. But I've worked so hard for my education. I'm so close to finishing. If I give up my tuition money now, I might never get back on track. My mother cut me off. Always me with you. What about your brother? Don't you care that he could be seriously hurt or worse? Of course I care, I protested. That's why I offered the $1,000. That's literally all I can spare without dropping out of school. It's not enough, Thomas said quietly, his eyes on the floor. They want $15,000 by tomorrow night. I frowned doing the math. Wait, I thought you said you had $7,000 already. With my $1,000, that would still leave $7,000 short. Even if I gave you everything I have, we'd still be short. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother and father exchanged glances. We had to use some of that money for other expenses, my father admitted reluctantly. The mortgage was due and there were some medical bills. The realization hit me like a truck. So you don't actually have any money at all. You want me to give you all $8,000 of my savings and you'll still be $7,000 short? No one would meet my eyes. What's your plan to get the rest? I demanded. Or am I supposed to solve that too? We thought, my mother said carefully, that once you agreed to help, we could approach your grandparents for the rest. My grandmother looked surprised at this. Clearly she hadn't been consulted. I stood up suddenly furious. So your plan was to pressure me into giving up my entire future, then use that to pressure Grandma and Grandpa. And none of you see anything wrong with this. Kelly, please sit down, Aunt Stephanie urged. We're trying to have a civilized discussion. This isn't a discussion, it's an ambush, I replied, my voice shaking, and I'm not participating anymore. As I turned to leave, Thomas called out, I already told them you'd pay. I froze. You what? He couldn't meet my eyes. I told the guys you'd cover it. I said my sister has the money and she's bringing it tomorrow. The blood drained from my face. You used my name with loan sharks. No one spoke. The weight of what he'd done settled over the room. They know about you now, my mother said quietly. They know where you work, where you live. They might come after you if they don't get their money. It was the final manipulation, the ultimate trap. Use my safety as leverage to force my compliance. I looked around the room at my family, these people who were supposed to love and protect me. Instead, they had thrown me to the wolves to save Thomas. Again. "I can't believe you would do this to me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Any of you." I walked out, ignoring the calls of my name, the pleas to come back and discuss this reasonably. There was nothing reasonable about what they had done. Nothing familial about using my safety as a bargaining chip. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with text after text. I ignored them all. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain: something fundamental had broken between me and my family, something that might never be repaired. The following days were the darkest of my life. My family's response to my final refusal was swift and merciless. First came the angry calls, then the tearful voicemails, and finally, 48 hours after I walked out of the family meeting, a single text from my mother that changed everything. "You're dead to us. Don't ever crawl back here again." I stared at those words until they blurred, unable to comprehend how the woman who had given birth to me, who had kissed my scraped knees and celebrated my achievements, could declare me dead to her. All because I refused to sacrifice my future for Thomas's mistakes. Again. The text was just the beginning. My father sent his own message shortly after. "Your mother is heartbroken. I never thought I raised such a selfish daughter. Don't contact us again." Thomas was more direct. "Thanks for nothing. Hope you're happy with yourself." One by one, extended family members began to block me on social media. Cousins I had grown up with, aunts and uncles who had attended my graduation, all vanishing from my digital life as if I had never existed. Only my grandmother sent a different kind of message. "This will pass, sweetheart. Give them time." But even she didn't stand up for me publicly. The isolation was total and immediate. In the span of 72 hours, I had gone from having a large interconnected family to being completely alone. I tried to focus on my studies, on my shifts at the hospital, on anything but the gaping wound where my family relationships had been. But the pain followed me everywhere. I would catch myself reaching for my phone to text my mum about a difficult patient or a good grade, only to remember that she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. The worst part was not knowing what had happened with Thomas's debt. Had they found the money elsewhere? Had he faced consequences? Was he safe? Despite everything, I still worried about my brother. About a week after the final text, I was studying in my apartment when there was a knock at the door. My heart leapt irrationally, hoping it might be my mother or father coming to apologize and reconcile. Instead, I found Amanda standing there with a grocery bag and a concerned expression. "You haven't been answering my texts," she said, brushing past me into the apartment. "And you look terrible. When was the last time you ate something that wasn't coffee?" I couldn't remember. The past week had been a blur of numbness interspersed with periods of intense grief. Amanda unpacked the grocery bag, revealing comfort food and a bottle of wine, as she moved around my small kitchen preparing a simple meal of pasta and salad. The dam inside me broke. I sank onto the couch and began to sob deep, body-racking cries that seemed to come from somewhere primal inside me. Amanda sat beside me, holding me while I cried. When the worst had passed, she handed me a tissue and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the family meeting, about Thomas telling the loan sharks I would pay, about my mother's final text. Amanda listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each new detail. "Kelly," she said when I finished, "what they did wasn't just wrong, it was abusive." The word landed like a physical blow. Abusive. I had never applied that term to my family dynamic before, but hearing it spoken aloud unlocked something. The patterns of manipulation, the scapegoating, the conditional love that had shaped my entire life suddenly had a name. "There's something else you should know," Amanda said carefully. "I ran into Zach from your anatomy class. His cousin works at the casino where Thomas gambles. The debt isn't $15,000, it's $30,000. I felt the room spin slightly. $30,000? Are you sure? Amanda nodded grimly. Zach's cousin said Thomas has been in deep for months. The $15,000 was just what he owed one particular group. The revelation was sickening. They had lied to me about the amount, probably planning to reveal the full sum only after I had committed my savings. It was further confirmation that I had made the right decision in refusing, but it did nothing to ease the pain of losing my family. "What do I do now?" I whispered. "First you eat," Amanda said firmly, handing me a plate of pasta. "Then you call campus security to do a safety check on your apartment, just in case Thomas really did give your information to dangerous people. And tomorrow, you're going to the counseling center." I started to protest, but Amanda cut me off. "This isn't negotiable, Kelly. You've been abandoned by your entire support system. You need professional help to process this." She was right, of course. The next day, I dragged myself to the campus counselling centre and was assigned to Dr. Wilson, a kind-eyed woman with grey, streaked hair and a gentle voice. In that first session, I could barely articulate what had happened without breaking down, but Dr. Wilson assured me that my feelings were normal. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief," she explained. "You've lost your family not through death but through rejection. That's a profound loss, and it's going to take time to work through." Over the following weeks, I continued therapy while trying to keep up with my coursework. I was falling behind my grades, slipping from A's to B's, and even a C on one important exam. The hospital supervisor noticed my distraction during shifts and took me aside to ask if everything was all right. "Family issues," I said vaguely, not wanting to burden her with the full story. She studied me for a moment, then squeezed my shoulder. "Whatever it is, don't let it derail your future, Kelly. You're one of our most promising aides. We're all expecting great things from you when you graduate." Her words should have been encouraging, but they only increased the pressure I felt. Graduate. If I could graduate. With each passing day, that goal seemed further away, buried under the weight of my grief and exhaustion. The breaking point came in early December. I was studying for finals, running on too little sleep and too much caffeine, when I received an unexpected email from the university's financial aid office. My scholarship was being put on academic review due to my slipping grades. If I didn't improve by the end of the semester, I could lose my funding. I stared at the screen, feeling the last of my strength drain away. Without my scholarship continuing, my education would be impossible. All my hard work, all my sacrifice, all my standing up to my family would be for nothing. I closed my laptop, crawled into bed, and pulled the covers over my head. For the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to consider giving up. Maybe my family was right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should have just given them the money and found another way to continue my education. I don't know how long I lay there spiraling deeper into despair before Amanda found me. She took one look at me, at the untouched textbooks and the email still open on my laptop, and made a decision. "Get dressed," she said, pulling the covers off me. "We're getting help." Too numb to resist, I let her guide me to the car and drive me back to the counselling centre. Dr. Wilson fit me in for an emergency session, during which she recommended I consider taking a medical leave of absence for the remainder of the semester. "This isn't giving up," she assured me, seeing the defeat in my eyes. "This is recognizing that you're in crisis and need time to heal. Your education will still be there when you're ready to return." I wanted to believe her, but all I could hear was my mother's voice, selfish, ungrateful failure. How ironic that in trying to protect my education, I might lose it anyway, broken by the very family who claimed I had abandoned them. Rock bottom, I've learned, is not a moment but a process. It's waking up each morning and remembering anew that your family wants nothing to do with you. It's checking your phone out of habit, hoping for a message that never comes. It's looking at your reflection and wondering if you're truly the villain in your own story. For 2 weeks after my emergency session with Dr. Wilson, I seriously considered dropping out of the nursing program. What was the point of fighting so hard for a future when I had no one to share it with? The upcoming holidays only sharpened my sense of isolation. It would be my first Christmas without family, a prospect that felt unbearably lonely. But Amanda refused to let me wallow. When she found me looking at withdrawal forms on the university website, she physically took my laptop away. "Enough," she said firmly. "You're not throwing away your future because your family is toxic. That's exactly what they want you to do, to prove them right that you can't make it on your own." Oh. Her words stung, but they also kindled a small spark of defiance in me. Was I really going to give my family the satisfaction of seeing me fail? After everything I had endured, was I going to prove them right? With Amanda's encouragement, I made an appointment with my academic advisor to discuss options. To my surprise, Professor Stevens was incredibly understanding. "You're not the first student to face a family crisis," she said kindly, "and your previous academic record is exemplary. Let's work out a plan that allows you to complete this semester without sacrificing your mental health." Together we arranged for deadline extensions on my remaining assignments and rescheduled 2 of my finals for after the holiday break. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it gave me breathing room to focus on my most immediate academic requirements while continuing therapy. Dr. Wilson's sessions became my lifeline during this period. She helped me recognize the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family relationships for years. "You've been cast in the role of family savior," she explained during one particularly illuminating session. Your achievements weren't celebrated because they were expected. You were supposed to be the responsible one, the one who fixed everyone else's problems. But why me? I asked. Why not Thomas? Family systems often assign roles early on. Your brother was designated the problem child, which paradoxically gave him more power and attention. Your role as the capable one meant you received less support because you supposedly needed it less. This framework helped me understand why my refusal to help Thomas had triggered such an extreme reaction. I hadn't just withheld money, I had rejected the very role I was supposed to play in the family narrative. Financially, I was struggling. Without family support, even small emergencies became crises. When my car needed new brakes, I had to put off buying textbooks for the next semester. I took on extra hospital shifts whenever they were available, often working until midnight, before crawling home to study for a few hours before classes. My supervisor at the hospital, Nurse Diane, noticed my exhaustion, but also my determination. She began assigning me to the more complex cases, testing my skills and knowledge. You have good instincts, she told me, after I correctly identified signs of sepsis in a patient before the attending doctor had noticed. And you're calm under pressure. Those aren't things that can be taught. Her quiet confidence in my abilities meant more than she could know. In a world where my own family had declared me dead to them, having someone believe in my potential was like water in a desert. In January, as I was preparing for the rescheduled finals, I met Professor Jessica Barnes, who taught advanced nursing ethics. She was known for being demanding but fair with decades of clinical experience before entering academia. When I approached her after class with questions about an assignment, our conversation somehow turned personal. You seem preoccupied, she observed. Is everything all right? Something about her direct gaze made evasion impossible. Before I knew it, I was sharing a condensed version of my family situation, instead of the pity I feared. Professor Barnes nodded thoughtfully. I went through something similar in my second year of nursing school, she revealed. Not with family, but with a fiancé who couldn't handle my ambition. He gave me an ultimatum, the relationship or my career. I chose nursing, and it was the hardest and best decision I ever made. She invited me to her office hours to discuss the assignment further, but those meetings gradually evolved into informal mentoring sessions. Professor Barnes recommended research papers, connected me with clinical opportunities, and most importantly, showed me what a successful independent woman in nursing looked like. You have a bright future in this field, she told me one day. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, especially not people who claim to love you but try to hold you back. With support from Amanda Dr. Wilson and now Professor Barnes, I slowly began to rebuild my confidence. I passed my rescheduled finals, maintained my scholarship by bringing my grades back up, and even joined a study group for advanced pathophysiology. Small victories accumulated. I made it through Christmas, spending the day with Amanda's family, who treated me like one of their own. I successfully negotiated a payment plan for my textbooks with the university bookstore. I received my first excellent evaluation from Nurse Diane, who noted my exceptional attention to patient needs and growing clinical confidence. None of these achievements erased the pain of family estrangement, but they proved to me that I could survive it. I could build a life based on my own values and goals, not the restrictive role I had been assigned in my family's dysfunction. As winter turned to spring, I began to envision a future beyond graduation, one shaped by my own choices rather than family expectations or obligations. It was terrifying, but also liberating, like stepping onto a high wire without a net, but finding that I could balance after all. By the time cherry blossoms appeared on campus in April, I had reached a turning point in my recovery. The raw wound of family rejection had formed a tender scar. It still hurt when touched, but it no longer dominated every moment of my existence. I had survived the worst and was cautiously building a new life. The turning point came during a late-night study session with my pathophysiology group. We had been working for hours, fueled by pizza and energy drinks, when somehow the conversation shifted from cardiac arrhythmias to personal struggles. My parents divorced last year, Javier shared. It's still weird going between two households for holidays. My dad lost his job when I was in high school, Mia added. We almost lost our house. That's why I'm so determined to have financial security. When it came my turn, I hesitated. I had kept my family situation private, sharing only with Amanda and a few trusted mentors. But something about the genuine openness of my classmates made me take a risk. My family disowned me last fall, I said quietly, because I wouldn't use my tuition money to pay off my brother's gambling debts. There was a moment of stunned silence, then Javier whistled low. That's messed up. Seriously messed up, Mia agreed. You did the right thing, Kelly. 100%, added Tyler, the fourth member of our group. Your education comes first. It's your future. Their immediate, unquestioning support brought unexpected tears to my eyes. These people, who I mainly knew through class discussions and study sessions, validated my decision without hesitation. They saw the situation with a clarity my family never had. Word spread quietly among my nursing cohort, not as gossip, but as context for why I sometimes seemed distracted or overwhelmed. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Classmates offered notes when I missed lectures for therapy appointments. Someone anonymously left a gift card for the campus bookstore in my mailbox. Professor Barnes arranged for me to receive a small departmental scholarship specifically for students facing financial hardship. We take care of our own in nursing, she explained when I tried to thank her. Someday you'll do the same for someone else. This growing circle of support gave me strength to maintain boundaries when my brother finally reached out in May, 6 months after the family had cut me off. His text was casual, as if nothing had happened. Hey sis, how's it going? My heart raced as I stared at those words. Part of me wanted to respond immediately to grasp at this tenuous connection to my family. But Dr. Wilson had helped me understand that healthy reconciliation, if it happened, would require acknowledgement of harm and changed behaviour, not just pretending the estrangement had never occurred. I waited 24 hours before responding. I'm doing okay. Still in school, still working at the hospital. Why are you reaching out now? His reply came quickly. Just missing my big sis. Also, things are kind of rough at home. Mum and Dad had to sell the house. There it was. Not a genuine desire to reconnect, but another veiled request for help. Further texts revealed the full story. My parents had indeed sold our family home to cover Thomas's gambling debts. They were now renting a small apartment, their credit ruined, their retirement savings depleted. They don't know I'm texting you, Thomas admitted. But I thought maybe you could help out a little, since you're working and all. I showed the exchange to Dr. Wilson during our next session. What do you want to do? She asked. Part of me wants to help, I admitted. They're still my family despite everything. And part of you is furious that they're asking for help after declaring me dead to them, that they only want a relationship when they need something from me. Dr. Wilson nodded. Both reactions are valid. The question is, what boundaries do you need to protect your well-being if you choose to engage? Over the next few weeks, I cautiously exchanged texts with Thomas, maintaining firm boundaries about financial assistance, but expressing concern for his well-being. I learned he had finally entered a Gamblers Anonymous program as part of a deal to avoid criminal charges for some bad checks he had written. I'm glad you're getting help, I texted him. That's the most important thing right now. It's hard, he admitted. But I'm trying. I'm sorry about everything that happened, Kelly. I really am. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't acknowledge the specific harm he had caused or the role he had played in turning our family against me. But it was a start. A small crack in the wall that had been built between us. My parents remained silent. Through Thomas, I learned that they still felt I had abandoned the family in our time of need. My mother especially could not forgive what she saw as a betrayal of family loyalty. As graduation approached, I faced the bittersweet reality that no family members would be there to celebrate this milestone with me. I had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and would cross that stage without the people who had known me longest. We'll be there, Amanda promised when I confessed this sadness. Me, my parents, my sister, we'll cheer so loud you'll be embarrassed. Count me in too, said Mia from our study group. Soon Javier and Tyler had also committed to attending. Professor Barnes, a president, surprised me by offering to host a small graduation party at her home. Nothing fancy, she insisted. Just a way to mark the occasion properly. Nurse Diane went a step further. She called me into her office one afternoon in early May. We've been impressed with your work, Kelly, she said without preamble. The nursing director and I would like to offer you a full-time position after graduation. Starting salary is competitive, and will work around your schedule if you decide to pursue advanced certification. I stared at her momentarily speechless. A guaranteed nursing position right out of school was rare and coveted. I know you've had a difficult year personally, Diane continued, but you've shown remarkable resilience and professionalism. Those are qualities we value highly in our nursing staff. As I left her office job offer letter in hand, I felt a surge of validation. Despite everything, despite losing my family's support and nearly breaking under the strain, I had persevered. I had stayed true to my goals and values, and now I was reaping the rewards of that determination. 2 weeks before graduation, Thomas called rather than texted. His voice was hesitant. "Mom and Dad know we've been talking, sir," he said. "They want to know if you'd meet with them." My heart stuttered. What for? They didn't say exactly, but things have been really hard since they sold the house. I think they might need help with rent next month. And there it was, the real reason for the sudden desire to reconcile. Not because they missed me or regretted their treatment of me, but because they needed financial assistance again. "Tell them I'll think about it." I said, my voice steady, despite the emotions churning inside me. After we hung up, I sat on my bed and allowed myself to fully feel the complex mix of grief, anger, and disappointment. 6 months of therapy had helped me understand that my family's dysfunction wasn't my fault, that their conditional love was about their issues, not my worth. But knowledge didn't erase the pain of realizing that even now they saw me primarily as a resource, not as a daughter who deserved love and support. With graduation just days away, I made my decision. I would not meet with my parents under these circumstances. If they wanted to attend my graduation, they would be welcome, but I would not discuss financial assistance. I would not step back into the role of family savior. I would celebrate this achievement on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. As promised, Amanda and her family were there along with my study group, Professor Barnes, and even Nurse Diane. They filled an entire row, cheering wildly when my name was called. As I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, I caught a glimpse of movement at the back of the auditorium. My grandmother stood there, elegant in a blue dress, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. She had come despite everything to witness this milestone. After the ceremony, she embraced me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Kelly," she whispered. "So very proud." "And thank you for coming," I said, fighting tears. "It means everything." "Your parents are stubborn," she said simply, "but they're hurting too. Give them time." I nodded, not making promises I wasn't sure I could keep. For now it was enough that she was here, that she had chosen to support me despite the family rift. As we moved toward the reception area, I felt a weight lifting. I had done it. I had honored my commitment to myself, completed my education, and secured a promising start to my career. Whatever happened with my family in the future, I had proven to myself that I could stand alone if necessary. But looking around at the supportive faces surrounding me, I realized I wasn't alone at all. I had built a chosen family of friends and mentors who valued my strength and respected my boundaries. Perhaps that was the greatest achievement of all. 1 year after graduation, my life had taken shape in ways I never could have imagined during those dark days of family estrangement. I had settled into my position at the university hospital, quickly earning a reputation for competence and compassion. My apartment, while still small, had been transformed from a student crash pad to a true home with plants on the windowsills and art on the walls. My relationship with my family remained complicated. Thomas continued his recovery through Gamblers Anonymous, marking 6 months of sobriety with a text that simply said, 180 days. Couldn't have done it without your tough love, sis. I had cautiously re-established communication with my father, mostly through occasional phone calls that carefully avoided mention of financial matters. He seemed genuinely interested in my nursing career, asking questions about my cases and responsibilities. There was an unspoken understanding that the past was too painful to discuss directly, so we focused on the present instead. My mother was another story. For months after graduation, she maintained her silence, refusing to acknowledge my attempts at contact. Then, on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after her "You're dead to us" text, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter on pale blue stationery. I recognized her handwriting immediately, the familiar looping script that had signed school permission slips and birthday cards throughout my childhood. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope and began to read, "Dear Kelly, I don't know how to begin this letter. Pride has kept me silent for too long, but your grandmother insists I must be the one to reach out first. She's right, as she often is. What happened last year was the worst mistake of my life." In my fear for Thomas and desperation to solve our problems, I lost sight of what matters most, the love I have for both my children. There is no excuse for the words I said to you or the way we treated you. Your brother is doing better now. The program is helping him understand his addiction, and he's working to make amends to those he's hurt. I realize now that by enabling his behavior for so many years, I contributed to his problems rather than solving them. Your father and I are slowly rebuilding our lives. The apartment is small but adequate. We both found new jobs, nothing glamorous, but enough to pay the bills. We're learning to live more simply. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for help. I just want you to know that I am deeply, profoundly sorry for everything. If you're willing, I would like to try to rebuild some kind of relationship. If not, I understand. You are always the strongest of us all. I see that clearly now. With love and regret, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't address all the years of putting Thomas first, of expecting me to sacrifice, while celebrating his smallest efforts. But it was honest in its own way, an acknowledgement of wrong, and a request for a second chance. What to do with this olive branch, Dr. Wilson, with whom I still had monthly check-ins, advised caution. Reconciliation is possible, she said, but it requires changed behaviour, not just apologetic words. What boundaries would you need to feel safe in renewing this relationship? It was a question I pondered deeply over the following weeks. I wanted my mother back in my life, but not at the cost of falling back into old dysfunctional patterns. Eventually, I drafted a response setting clear terms. I would be open to gradually rebuilding our relationship, but financial matters were off limits for now. I would not be responsible for solving family problems or providing emergency funds. I needed acknowledgement of my achievements and respect for my independence. Most importantly, I needed honesty even when it was difficult. These aren't punishments, I wrote. They're the foundation of a healthier relationship than we had before. I love you, Mom, but I love myself too. I've learned that those two things don't have to be in conflict. Her response was immediate and affirmative. She agreed to all my terms and suggested we start with a lunch at a neutral location, just the two of us. That first meeting was awkward, filled with careful small talk and long pauses. But it was a beginning. Over the months that followed, we established a new rhythm of weekly phone calls and monthly lunches. Sometimes we talked about substantive things, her adjustment to working retail after years as a boutique manager, my challenging cases at the hospital. Other times we kept it light, a movie she'd enjoyed, a new restaurant I'd tried. Thomas entered a residential treatment program in the spring, a more intensive approach to his recovery. I visited him there bringing magazines and snacks approved by the facility. I really messed up, didn't I? He said during one visit, his expression serious. Not just the gambling, but how I treated you, using you as a safety net without ever thinking about what it cost you. You did, I agreed, not softening the truth. But you're getting help now, that's what matters. I want to pay you back, he said. Not just the money, but for everything. It might take years, but I'm going to make it right. I didn't tell him that the money didn't matter to me anymore. His acknowledgement of the harm he'd caused was more valuable than any repayment. Instead, I simply nodded and said, one day at a time, right? That's what they teach you in the program. My father remained the most distant, struggling to express emotions or acknowledge past mistakes directly, but he showed his attempt at amends in other ways, helping me move to a slightly larger apartment, sending articles about nursing innovations he thought might interest me, remembering to call on my birthday. Rebuilding these relationships was slow, sometimes painful work. There were setbacks, a Thanksgiving dinner that ended in tense silence, when my mother made an offhand comment about family obligations, triggering old wounds. There were also breakthroughs, my father asking my professional opinion about a health concern, acknowledging my expertise for the first time. Through it all, I maintained the support network I had built during the estrangement. Amanda remained my closest friend, even after she moved to Chicago for a job opportunity. My nursing colleagues became a second family with inside jokes and after-shift traditions. Professor Barnes continued to mentor me, encouraging me to consider graduate school in the future. I created new holiday traditions that reflected my values. Instead of the obligatory family gatherings of the past, I volunteered at the hospital on Christmas morning, bringing small gifts to patients who couldn't be home for the holidays. I hosted small dinner parties for friends who, like me, had complicated relationships with their families of origin. The most profound change, however, was internal. I no longer measured my worth by my usefulness to others or my ability to solve problems. I had learned to value my own needs and aspirations without guilt. I had discovered that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, but necessary for authentic relationships. One evening, as I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. From the devastating text that had declared me dead to my family, to the gradual rebuilding of relationships on healthier terms, I had traversed an emotional landscape I never expected to face. The truth is, sometimes the most loving thing we can do, both for ourselves and for others, is to say no. To set boundaries that protect our well-being and future. To refuse to participate in patterns that harm us, even when that refusal comes at great cost. My family is still healing, still learning new ways to interact. I don't know if we'll ever have the kind of relationship I once dreamed of. But I know with certainty that the painful choice I made that October day, refusing to sacrifice my education for my brother's gambling debts, was the right one. It forced a reckoning that was long overdue. It broke open a dysfunctional system that had trapped us all in destructive roles. Sometimes standing your ground means losing people you love, at least for a while. It means facing the fear of abandonment and discovering that you can survive it. It means building a life on your own terms with people who respect your boundaries and celebrate your strength. That's the lesson I carry forward. True family, whether born or chosen, lifts you up rather than holding you back. It encourages your growth rather than demanding your sacrifice. And sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is walk away from those who cannot or will not see your worth. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between your own well-being and what your family expected of you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found my journey meaningful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve to protect your dreams, even when it feels like the whole world is telling you otherwise.